Sometimes the wild teaches us lessons we could never anticipate. The first light of dawn on the Kenyon savannah brought a roar so desperate, so haunting, it froze me in my tracks. A lion, a male, was trying to save his mate from drowning in a treacherous mud trap. I had spent 15 years photographing wildlife, but nothing could have prepared me for what I witnessed next. If you love the wild and stories of courage, intelligence, and unexpected bonds in nature, make sure to follow, like, and comment below. Let's explore together what happens when humans and wild predators connect in ways that defy explanation. The first light of dawn stretched across the Kenyan savannah like liquid gold, brushing the tall grasses in hues of fire and shadow. I was just beginning to shake the sleep from my eyes when a sound tore through the air, a roar so deep, guttural, and full of desperation that it made the ground seem to vibrate beneath me. 15 years of wildlife photography photography had taught me to recognize almost every lion vocalization, but nothing in that time had prepared me for this. My heart thumped erratically in my chest as I scrambled for my camera, the weight of the equipment suddenly irrelevant compared to the instinct that propelled me forward. Muai, my guide and longtime companion, was already alert. He stood silently, ears straining, head cocked toward the distant river bend. "That's coming from the river," he whispered, his voice barely audible. His eyes were sharp, scanning the horizon with the trained intensity of a man who had spent decades reading the African plains like an open book. Something's wrong. We had been camped at the Aluro Conservancy for 3 days, documenting the seasonal migration. The drought had been brutal this year, transforming the normally lush savanna into a patchwork of brittle grasslands, exposed mud, and dwindling waterholes. Wildlife congregated in unusually dense clusters around the remaining sources of water, creating not only a photographer's paradise, but also a landscape riddled with danger. The Mara River, usually full and flowing, had receded to reveal stretches of slick, deceptive mud. Even a small misstep could become a death sentence. I hesitated only for a moment. Wildlife photographers are bound by strict rules. Observe, document, never interfere. Yet the sound, the urgency, pulled at something deeper than training. I gave Moy a nod, and together we moved toward the river, careful to keep our steps soft, the early sunlight casting our long shadows across the uneven terrain. The savannah was waking around us, a distant drumbeat of hooves on hard earth, the occasional caw of a startled bird, the whisper of wind through parched grass. But nothing could mask the sound of that lion, a sound charged with both fear and determination. When we rounded the bend, the scene unfolded like a tableau of primal struggle. A massive male lion, mane darkened like storm clouds, paced frantically along the riverbank. His muscles rippled under tawny fur, eyes wide with anxious focus. In the water, about 15 feet from the bank, a lioness flailed in desperation. Her front paws clawed at a slick mud patch, each movement thwarted by the treacherous ground. Every time she slipped, the male roared, a roar that had drawn us here, low, aching, full of frustration and helplessness. "That's the Nkarai pair," Mutai murmured, recognition soft in his voice. "Mated for 3 seasons. Drought forced them to hunt near the river. She's caught in a mud trap." Mud traps are lethal even to the strongest animals. A blend of clay and silt, deceptively stable, becomes like quicksand when wet, pulling down whatever steps onto it. The lioness's head barely rose above the water with each struggling effort. Her strength was waning, her motions slower, more desperate with every passing second. The male paced again, muscles tensing before plunging into the water. Lions are not naturally swimmers. They can cross water when necessary, but it is never their preference. This act was intentional, purposeful, a display of desperation and focus. He reached her, attempting to grip her neck with a careful precision reminiscent of a lioness carrying cubs. But the angle was wrong, and his weight pushed her further into the muddy abyss. Each time they tried, the outcome was the same. Exhaustion set in. Mutai's usual calm cracked. "He's going to lose her," he whispered, eyes locked on the pair. I raised my camera, hands trembling despite my years of experience. Ethically, I knew I should stay put, document, remain an observer. But instinct screamed louder than protocol. The lioness's struggles became erratic, her head dipping perilously below the surface. My throat tightened, and I swallowed back the knot of panic forming there. Then something that would change the course of the day, and perhaps my career, appeared in my mind. The rope from our vehicle, used for hauling equipment in river crossings. Without hesitation, I sprinted back to the Land Rover, ignoring Mutai's shouted warning. "Mitchell, what are you doing?" "I can't just stand here," I panted, grabbing the heavy nylon coil. My mind raced through possibilities, danger, consequences, every rule I had ever learned about interference. But none of that mattered now. Only her life mattered. Returning to the river, I fashioned a crude lasso, careful to maintain as much distance as possible from the male while reaching the lioness. His head swiveled immediately, muscles tensing. I froze, every fiber in my body screaming to retreat. This was a 450-pound apex predator, every bit capable of ending my life in a heartbeat. And yet, something unexpected happened. He roared, questioning, almost as if trying to comprehend my intent, then stepped back slightly, creating a fragile space for intervention. The first throw missed. The second snagged briefly, then slipped. The male growled low, agitation rising. The third caught securely behind her front legs. I began to pull gently, testing the hold, each motion deliberate, measured. Mutai warned, "He's going to charge. Move now." The lioness gathered every ounce of remaining strength. Inch by painstaking inch, she clawed toward firmer ground. I stepped back steadily, keeping tension on the rope, measuring the male's reactions. The balance was precarious. One misstep could provoke him into attack. And then, finally, she reached the firmer shoreline. I released the rope, hearts pounding in unison with the rhythm of survival itself. The male rushed forward, not with aggression, but with unmistakable concern. He nudged her body gently, circling, inspecting, then lay down beside her. His mane partially covered her, offering warmth and protection. I raised my camera, capturing the scene with hands that shook uncontrollably. Here was something beyond understanding, a primal bond, a desperate effort that spoke of devotion and intelligence in a way humans rarely witness. Slowly, she lifted herself on trembling legs. He stayed close, brushing his body against hers as they disappeared into the tall grass together. I sank to my knees, relief and disbelief flooding me. Mutai's voice broke the silence. "You broke every rule." "I couldn't let her die," I whispered, breathless. He nodded solemnly, the Maasai wisdom of his people echoing in his words. Sometimes the right path walks through the wrong gate. The river was quiet once more. Only the distant, fading roars of the lions remained, carrying with them the echo of a moment that would stay etched in memory forever. A single, desperate act at the water's edge had defied rules, ethics, and the expected order. But it had saved a life and revealed a connection deeper than either species fully understood. The adrenaline from the river rescue still thrummed through my veins, a chaotic pulse that refused to fade even as the sun climbed higher over the Savannah. The first shock of survival had passed, leaving in its place a heavy, almost tangible awareness of what I had done. Wildlife photography had always been a dance of distance, observation, and restraint. Today I had thrown every rule aside, and yet, as I sat on the dusty bank, replaying the river scene in my mind, there was no hint of regret for the lion's sake, only a dawning apprehension about the consequences that were sure to follow. Mutai's voice broke the silence, measured but heavy with unspoken judgment. "You know this will not end quietly," he said, eyes scanning the horizon as if the consequences might arrive riding the wind. I nodded silently, understanding the gravity in his tone. Interfering in the lives of apex predators, especially lions, was more than a breach of ethics. It was a potential professional death sentence. Conservation laws, wildlife regulations, and international protocols all made one thing clear. Human interference, no matter how well-intentioned, carried severe penalties. By mid-morning, word of the incident had reached the Uluru Conservancy headquarters. A vehicle, official and somber, arrived under the blazing sun. Inside, the Kenya Wildlife Service representatives carried an authority that seemed almost tangible. Among them was Dr. Njeri Kamau, regional director and a figure whose reputation for rigorous adherence to conservation principles preceded her. Her eyes, sharp and calculating, immediately found me, assessing the weight of my actions before I could even utter a word. "Mr. Harrison," she began, using my full name with deliberate formality, "what you did yesterday violated fundamental principles of wildlife management. You endangered yourself, your guide, and most importantly, interfered in the natural processes of an ecosystem that we are sworn to protect." Her voice was calm but laced with the authority of someone accustomed to enforcing consequences without hesitation. I lowered my gaze, swallowing the instinct to justify myself. "I understand the violation, Dr. Camo. I spent years advocating for non-interference." Her expression softened for a fraction of a second, only to harden again. "Then you understand I have no choice but to revoke your photography permit and recommend your removal from the Conservancy. The incident will be reported to the International Wildlife Photography Association. Consider this a professional death sentence, Mr. Harrison." I nodded, accepting the inevitability. My hands, which had held a rope only hours before, now rested limply at my sides. Every precaution I had ever followed, every ethical guideline seemed suddenly irrelevant. In the span of a few moments, the last 15 years of carefully cultivated reputation and trust had been thrown into jeopardy. Mutai's presence beside me was silent but grounding. He did not speak, did not offer consolation. He simply watched as I processed the rebuke. Later, by the campfire, he finally broke the silence. "I could have stopped you," he admitted quietly, "but I knew you would not be stopped. You made your choice at the river." "I'm sorry for compromising your position," I said, the embers of the fire casting flickering shadows across our faces. Mutai shook his head. "You acted from your heart. That is all one can do. Sometimes the right path walks through the wrong gate." His words, steeped in Maasai wisdom, lingered in the heavy night air. Sleep that night was fitful, haunted by visions of the drowning lioness and the male pacing desperately in the water. Every twist of mud, every struggling paw played out in my mind in painstaking detail. My dreams merged with memories, creating a restless, almost surreal montage of heroism and recklessness. I woke repeatedly, heart hammering, each time convinced that the lions might have been lost, that the river's unforgiving mud had claimed what I had fought to save. By the next pre-dawn, commotion erupted outside the tent. Urgent voices, footsteps on dry earth, the low murmur of radios and instructions. The camp had awakened to a new crisis. Mutai was speaking rapidly with Dr. Camo and two KWS Rangers, their faces illuminated by flashlight beams cutting through the early haze. "What's happening?" I asked, still bleary-eyed and exhausted. Dr. Camo turned toward me, her expression a mixture of curiosity and professional concern. "Your lions have returned," she said simply. My heart stuttered. "Returned? How could they?" "To the edge of the camp," she clarified. "The male was spotted by the night watchman about an hour ago. The female is with him. This is unusual behavior. Lions generally avoid human encampments unless habituated to people." I glanced at Mutai, whose eyes reflected cautious surprise. He gave a small shrug. "They've remembered," he whispered. The thought was absurd, yet undeniable. These were wild lions, shy and unacquainted with humans. Yet they had somehow associated us with the survival of one of their own. Dr. Camo's practical side quickly asserted itself. "We need to assess their condition, especially the female. She may have been injured during the river incident, but we cannot approach too closely. They are not acting predictably." I understood without needing her to elaborate. She wanted me to approach them. After everything I had just been reprimanded for, she was effectively asking me to risk my life, to test the fragile thread of trust that had formed. "Yes," she said, as if reading my thoughts. "We need you. Your rapport may be the only way to safely evaluate her condition." 20 minutes later, I found myself in a KWS vehicle with Dr. Camo, Mutai, and Ranger Okilo, who carried a tranquilizer rifle. The atmosphere was tense, electric with anticipation. As we approached the eastern perimeter of the camp, the headlights illuminated the lions. The male stood alert, mane bristling slightly in the artificial light, while Mara, the female, lay on the grass beside him, coated in dried mud, but alive. "Stop here," I said, recognizing the delicate balance of distance. Any closer could provoke flight or attack. Dr. Camo killed the engine and we sat in heavy silence. The morning sun had not yet broken fully, but the first rays glinted off the male's amber eyes. His gaze was fixed on me, a mixture of recognition, wariness, and something deeper I could not define. I opened the vehicle door slowly. The ground was rough beneath my boots, each step a negotiation with gravity and instinct. The male shifted instantly, muscles coiling, ready to defend his mate from this unexpected intrusion. My heart thudded painfully, but I forced myself to remain calm, hands open and visible. I knew that any sudden movement could endanger all of us. Then something extraordinary happened. Instead of aggression, the male lion maintained his position, his eyes following me, measuring me, testing my intentions. Mara lifted her head slightly, her breathing shallow but steady. It was a fragile truce born of the memory of the previous day's rescue, a silent acknowledgement of my role in her survival. The risk was immense, the professional consequences clear, yet in that moment I realized the deeper significance of what had unfolded. The lions had not only survived, but had, in some incomprehensible way, communicated their trust. What I had feared might end in catastrophe instead opened the door to unprecedented understanding of predator behavior, social bonds, and the unspoken dialogue between species. Even as the adrenaline ebbed, replaced by careful calculation and observation, I understood the precarious line I now walked. Every choice mattered. One wrong gesture could shatter the fragile rapport. One misjudgment could have led to disaster. Yet the possibility of meaningful intervention and care hovered just within reach. The consequences were no longer hypothetical. They were real, immediate, and heavy with responsibility. The morning stretched on, filled with quiet observation and careful planning. Dr. Kamau spoke sparingly, her professional skepticism tempered by the undeniable behavior she witnessed. Mutai remained close, silent, his eyes alternating between the lions and me, a bridge between instinct and protocol. And I, suspended between fear, hope, and fascination, realized that the events of the previous day had irrevocably changed not only the fate of Mara and Simba, but also my own understanding of what it meant to act in the wild. In the stillness before the sun fully claimed the sky, one truth became undeniable. The bonds between these lions were extraordinary, their awareness profound, and the repercussions of my intervention were only beginning to unfold. The river rescue was no longer an isolated event. It had become the catalyst for a chain of consequences, controversies, and discoveries that would challenge every assumption I had held about wildlife, human responsibility, and the fragile intersection of compassion and protocol. The morning air was still crisp when the first signs of the lions' unusual return reached our ears. News of their presence spread quickly through the camp, carried on tense whispers and urgent footsteps. By the time I arrived at the perimeter with Mutai, Dr. Kamau, and Ranger Okello, the Nkurai pair had already made their intentions clear. They were close, too close for standard safety measures. The male, Simba, stood alert, his golden mane catching the first rays of light, while Mara, still coated with dried mud from the river, lay cautiously nearby. Even from a distance, her injuries were visible. One of her back legs was swollen, the dried mud cracking along what appeared to be a deep wound. Dr. Kamau's voice was low, edged with both skepticism and concern. "This is highly irregular. They should not have returned, and they should certainly not allow anyone within this proximity." She glanced at me, eyes narrowing, a mixture of incredulity and professional curiosity. "Your connection with them yesterday seems to have altered their behavior." Mutai stepped forward, quiet but deliberate. "They remember you. They trust you, or at least they recognize that you did not intend harm." His words were simple, yet their weight was profound. I swallowed, feeling the gravity of what we were about to attempt. Every step forward was a negotiation with instinct, trust, and the invisible threads connecting human and animal intelligence. The first challenge was Mara. Her breathing was labored, shallow, and uneven. She had clearly struggled to recover from the mud trap. An infection had set into her wounds. The urgency to administer medical care was palpable, yet approaching her directly carried risks. Lions, even injured ones, are capable of sudden aggression. Every muscle, every reflex is honed for survival. We approached slowly, each movement deliberate. I kept my hands open, palms facing outward, a universal sign of non-threat, while Mutai mirrored my pace at a measured distance. Simba's gaze never wavered, a steady amber anchor, as if weighing every step we took. Mara's eyes flickered with pain and fatigue, but she did not retreat, a sign that the bond we had forged in the river still held. Ranger Okello prepared the tranquilizer rifle, a necessary precaution in case the situation escalated. Dr. Kamau guided his aim with precision, whispering instructions in clipped tones while I maintained constant eye contact with Simba. The tension was electric, each heartbeat amplified by the anticipation of potential violence. And yet, for all the danger, there was a strange symmetry to the moment, a balance between human intervention and wild trust that few ever experience. I inched closer, assessing Mara's condition, careful not to provoke either lion. Her swollen leg bore a deep, angry wound, partially obscured by caked mud. Infection had begun, and without immediate treatment, survival beyond another day was uncertain. Dr. Kamo's voice broke the stillness. "We need to sedate her. This is the only way to prevent further trauma." Okello fired a dart with precise timing. Mara flinched but did not bolt or strike. Simba shifted, growling low in his throat, yet he maintained a steady, protective position beside her. I could feel the heat radiating from his massive body, the silent tension of a predator on high alert. And still, there was no aggression directed at us. It was as if he understood that the intervention, though foreign, was in service of her well-being. As the sedative took hold, Mara's movements slowed, her eyelids drooping, her breathing deepening. Simba adjusted his posture, lying partially across her path, a protective shield. The precision of his attention was staggering. He did not interfere with the procedure, yet he did not leave her side. There was an intelligence in his awareness, a comprehension of her vulnerability and the necessity of our actions that challenged conventional understanding of predator behavior. The examination revealed the full extent of the injuries. Dr. Kamau inspected the swollen leg, noting areas of infection and tissue damage. Mara's dehydration was severe, and her overall condition reflected the ordeal she had endured in the river. She would need antibiotics, fluids, and ongoing care, treatment impossible to administer fully in the field. Decisions had to be made quickly. "What about the male?" I asked, my mind racing. Separating bonded lions can induce extreme stress, sometimes fatal for females already weakened by injury. But bringing Simba into captivity, even temporarily, presented obvious dangers. Dr. Kamau considered the dilemma silently before nodding toward me. "We may need to sedate him as well briefly to ensure both their safety during transportation." This is unprecedented. Even as the words left her mouth, Simba's gaze locked on mine. He rose slowly, approaching cautiously, stopping just a few feet away. The proximity was terrifying, yet mesmerizing. Every scar, every ripple of muscle in his massive frame conveyed strength and intent. And still, there was no hostility, only a measured, deliberate focus on me, as if testing whether I understood the stakes. I realized then that he would not leave Mara's side. His devotion, his awareness, was absolute. Any attempt to separate them forcibly could have catastrophic consequences. The sedative, though risky, became the only feasible solution. Okello prepared the second dart while I maintained eye contact with Simba, silently acknowledging the trust and awareness in his stance. As both lions were safely sedated, the field team worked efficiently to administer fluids, antibiotics, and preliminary treatment to Mara's leg. Simba remained near her, lying down in the soft grass, eyes occasionally opening to monitor her condition. The coordination between predator and human intervention was remarkable. He did not understand the procedures, yet he recognized their purpose. His protective vigilance never wavered. Once Mara was stabilized enough for transport, we faced the next challenge, moving both lions to the veterinary facility near Nairobi. The logistics were complex, but necessity drove precision. Transport carriers were positioned side by side, prepared for simultaneous loading. Mara, sedated but stable, was secured first. Simba remained alert, muscles taut even under sedation, eyes tracking the movement of every human around him. The journey to the facility was tense but uneventful, a testament to careful planning and the lion's rare composure. At the facility, Mara underwent surgery to clean and drain the infected wound. while Simba was sedated only long enough for a thorough health assessment. The remarkable outcome defied expectations. Rather than showing stress or aggression, Simba remained focused on the partition separating him from Mara, pacing carefully, his attention unwavering. His cortisol levels, which should have spiked in such a situation, were only moderately elevated. It was as if he understood that both he and his mate were receiving care for a shared purpose. Over the next 72 hours, Mara recovered under close observation. Simba's behavior continued to astonish the veterinary team. His patience, attentiveness, and emotional consistency challenged the assumptions of even the most experienced wildlife specialists. The connections between them, between predator and human, between instinct and trust, were creating a case study in behavioral ecology that few could have anticipated. I spent hours documenting their behavior, capturing interactions that defied conventional wisdom about lions. Every movement, every glance, every subtle gesture from Simba suggested a level of awareness and social understanding beyond the simplistic models typically used to interpret predator behavior. Mara's recovery progressed steadily under the care of the team, her injuries healing, her strength returning. By the end of the week, the decision to release the lions back into the conservancy was made. The facility staff, myself, and the KWS veterinary team coordinated the release site meticulously. Abundant prey, clean water, and minimal human contact. Both lions were fitted with GPS collars to monitor their movements and ensure successful reintegration into the wild. As we prepared for release, I realized the full magnitude of what had transpired. A single intervention at the river, an ethical violation in the eyes of many, had transformed into an unprecedented opportunity to observe complex cognition, emotional bonding, and trust in large predators. The implications for wildlife management, conservation practices, and ethical intervention were profound. Standing at the release site, watching Simba and Mara emerge cautiously from their carriers, I felt a mixture of awe, humility, and responsibility. The lions approached with deliberate calm, occasionally glancing toward me as if to ensure I was witnessing their return to freedom. Simba led with Mara close behind, their bodies moving in sync, a living testament to the bond that had carried them through life-threatening danger, medical intervention, and human scrutiny. For a long moment, I simply watched. In their amber eyes, I glimpsed something ancient, primal, yet profoundly intelligent. The river rescue had been only the beginning, a prelude to a story of survival, trust, and the extraordinary capacities of these wild predators. And as they disappeared into the tall grass of their reclaimed savanna, I knew that our understanding of lion behavior, social bonds, and human-wildlife interaction had been forever altered. The veterinary facility outside Nairobi was a stark contrast to the wild expanses of the Kenyan savanna. Here, every movement, every decision was calculated with precision, balancing the unpredictable nature of apex predators with the structured procedures of modern wildlife medicine. Mara, the lioness rescued from the river, lay sedated on a padded examination table, her body still marred with mud and injury, but gradually beginning to respond to treatment. Beside her, Simba, the male lion, remained in an adjacent enclosure, sedated only briefly to allow for a complete health check. Even in captivity, his posture, his movements, and the intensity of his gaze reflected a profound awareness of her condition and the invisible threads that bound them together. The veterinary team moved with careful deliberation, preparing antibiotics, fluids, and surgical instruments. Dr. Kamau oversaw every step, her scientific skepticism gradually giving way to a recognition of something extraordinary. This was not merely a case of injury and recovery. It was an unprecedented demonstration of social bonds, cognitive recognition, and what appeared to be a sophisticated understanding of human intervention. I remained nearby, documenting every action with my camera. Years of professional caution had taught me to observe from a distance, yet the prior day's events had created a rare rapport with these animals. Simba's gaze often found mine, amber eyes unblinking, assessing the strange foreign creatures responsible for tending to his mate. Mara, though sedated, occasionally twitched or lifted a paw, her reactions subtle but telling, signaling both trust and discomfort in equal measure. As Mara underwent surgery to clean and drain the infected wound on her back leg, the team worked efficiently, guided by experience and the gravity of the situation. The infection had taken hold faster than anticipated, and without proper intervention, survival beyond a few days was unlikely. Each incision, each suture, each administration of medication was executed with precision. Yet beneath the clinical atmosphere was an undercurrent of reverence for life, for resilience, and for the extraordinary bond exhibited by these lions. Simba's reaction throughout the procedure was nothing short of astonishing. Instead of the expected stress or agitation typically observed in wild predators removed from their natural environment, he remained alert, pacing occasionally, always maintaining proximity to Mara's enclosure. His body language was protective rather than aggressive, attentive rather than indifferent. It was as though he understood the purpose of the human intervention, an awareness that defied conventional wildlife behavioral models. The veterinary team monitored Mara's vital signs, carefully adjusting fluids and administering antibiotics. Her breathing stabilized, and the swelling in her leg began to recede under the treatment. Yet she remained vulnerable. Every movement of Simba mirrored concern, his head following the team, his ears flicking at every sound, his amber eyes tracking each procedure. The synchronicity of their behavior suggested a cognitive depth that few researchers had previously documented in wild lions. Over the next 72 hours, the facility became a stage for observation and study. Dr. Kamau, initially cautious, began recording detailed notes, documenting the extraordinary attentiveness and apparent comprehension of both lions. The data challenged assumptions about predator cognition, social awareness, and the capacity for recognition of human-assisted care. Each day, Simba exhibited behaviors that suggested he understood both the necessity and outcome of the procedures being performed on Mara. He did not interfere, did not display aggression, but remained watchful, almost vigilantly so, a silent guardian and witness. As Mara's condition improved, the focus shifted to preparation for release. The conservancy team, alongside the veterinary staff, selected a site that would maximize her chances of survival. Abundant prey, clean water sources, minimal human interference, and no established prides in the immediate vicinity. GPS collars were fitted to both lions to track movements, ensure reintegration success, and monitor social interactions post-release. On the day of release, the morning light painted the savanna in soft hues of amber and gold. Transport carriers were positioned side by side, their doors open, a threshold between captivity and freedom. Mara emerged cautiously, her gait uneven but determined, her legs showing the strength regained through medical care. Simba followed closely, moving with deliberate precision, never allowing distance between them to exceed a few feet. As we observed from a safe distance, the scene unfolded with a quiet majesty. Both lions paused, assessing the expanse before them. Then, with deliberate steps, they moved forward, exploring cautiously, scenting the air, and reorienting themselves to their reclaimed territory. At moments, they glanced back, almost acknowledging our presence, a subtle recognition of the human intervention that had facilitated this second chance. The reunification and release were more than a physical transition. They represented a restoration of agency, a reclaiming of the wild instincts that had been momentarily suspended during treatment. Simba and Mara moved together, a cohesive unit, illustrating the depth of their bond in both behavior and intent. The synchronization of movement, the occasional nudge, the attentive glances toward each other, all spoke to a level of partnership and understanding rarely documented outside controlled research environments. The impact of this rehabilitation extended beyond the lions themselves. The story rapidly captured global attention, not only because of the dramatic river rescue, but due to the unprecedented behavior observed during captivity and release. Conservation organizations, researchers, and media outlets sought documentation and commentary, eager to understand and disseminate what had become a landmark case in predator social behavior. Mara and Simba's progress became a framework for further study. Camera traps installed at the release site alongside GPS tracking provided data on their territory establishment, hunting patterns, and interactions with other wildlife. The results were extraordinary. Within weeks, they successfully navigated their environment, maintained proximity and coordination, and exhibited behaviors suggesting both retained memory of human interaction and independent problem-solving. During this period, I continued documenting their activities, capturing not only the raw survival instincts of these lions, but also the nuanced social interactions, gestures of care, and the intelligence displayed in their adaptation to a post-intervention landscape. Each photograph, each note, each observation contributed to a growing understanding that predator cognition and social awareness were far more complex than previously appreciated. By the end of the first month post-release, Mara had regained full strength. Her leg healed completely, leaving only a subtle limp visible during colder mornings, a quiet testament to her ordeal and resilience. Simba's vigilance remained, a persistent but balanced attentiveness that suggested both confidence in her recovery and an enduring bond forged through life-threatening adversity. The release site became a hub for ongoing research. Observational studies were conducted under strict ethical guidelines to minimize human interference while maximizing data collection. The behavior of Mara and Simba challenged existing assumptions about wild lion social structures, the cognitive recognition of humans, and the dynamics of predator bonding. Each observation offered new insight, creating an evolving narrative that combined elements of biology, psychology, and conservation science. Beyond the scientific implications, the rehabilitation and release also inspired broader conservation initiatives. The story highlighted the potential for carefully considered human intervention to preserve life without disrupting natural processes. It generated public interest, encouraged donations for lion conservation, and emphasized the importance of understanding individual animal behavior in managing endangered species. Watching Mara and Simba integrate into their environment, I felt a profound mixture of awe and humility. What had begun as a desperate river rescue had transformed into a comprehensive study of survival, cognition, and the extraordinary capacities of these predators. It was a reminder that compassion, even when controversial, can intersect with science to create outcomes that benefit both wildlife and human understanding. As the sun climbed higher, casting long shadows across the savannah, Mara and Simba moved together confident and free, their bond unbroken. The facility team, Mutai, Dr. Umshayapa, Kamau and I stood quietly, witnessing the culmination of an extraordinary journey, a testament to resilience, intelligence, and the enduring power of trust, both within species and across the divide between human and wild predator. The months following the release of Mara and Simba into the Conservancy were filled with anticipation, observation, and a sense of quiet wonder. Unlike typical rehabilitation cases, this pair exhibited behaviors that demanded constant attention, both from a scientific and personal perspective. Their reintegration was not merely about survival, it was a study in cognition, social bonds, and the consequences of human intervention in the wild. Each day brought new revelations, confirming that what we had witnessed at the river was only the beginning of a story far larger than any of us had anticipated. From my vantage point at the observation blinds, I could see the lions moving with purpose, establishing territory and asserting dominance in subtle ways. Mara's leg had fully healed, her stride almost indistinguishable from the unaffected limbs, though a faint limp sometimes betrayed her past ordeal. Simba remained at her side, his vigilance unwavering, scanning the horizon while maintaining proximity to her. The synchronization of their movements, the subtle cues they exchanged, and their attentiveness to both prey and potential threats were extraordinary to witness firsthand. Camera traps and GPS collars provided a wealth of data that reshaped our understanding of predator behavior. Unlike other lions reintroduced into the wild, Mara and Simba demonstrated a remarkable capacity for anticipation and strategic coordination. Their hunting patterns were carefully calculated, with Simba often taking positions that optimized surveillance and protection, while Mara executed precision attacks. These behaviors suggested not only cognitive sophistication, but also a nuanced understanding of cooperation, a level of social intelligence that challenged previously held assumptions about the species. What fascinated the researchers most was the apparent awareness the lions exhibited regarding human observation. During several monitoring sessions, Simba approached camera traps deliberately, positioning himself in ways that seemed almost conscious of the technology. It was as if he were performing, aware that someone somewhere was documenting their movements. This behavior sparked intense debate within the conservation and scientific communities. Was this true awareness, or an instinctual response amplified by prior interactions with humans? The answer remained elusive, but the evidence suggested a level of cognitive engagement far beyond the norm. The media attention surrounding Mara and Simba only amplified the significance of the case. National and international outlets featured their story, highlighting the river rescue, the subsequent medical intervention, and the extraordinary behavioral observations post-release. Photographs I had taken at the river, capturing Simba's protective stance and Mara's struggle, were published in National Geographic and several conservation journals, providing a visceral visual account of the events. A documentary crew visited the facility, capturing footage that showcased the subtle social dynamics, intelligence, and adaptability of the pair. The project was eventually titled The Lion's Trust, encapsulating the essence of the bond and the lessons we were learning from their extraordinary journey. Scientific inquiry deepened. Researchers began to explore questions previously thought unanswerable in the wild. Could lions recognize individual humans? Did they comprehend the concept of assistance or intervention in a way that transcended instinct? Mara and Simba's behavior suggested the answer was more complex than any simple yes or no. Their interactions, both with each other and with human caregivers during the rehabilitation phase, hinted at a sophisticated awareness and capacity for associative memory. Every glance, every gesture, and every movement became data points in a narrative of intelligence, emotion, and survival. Beyond the immediate scientific implications, the story had a profound effect on conservation practices. The evidence provided by Mara and Simba's case challenged traditional guidelines on non-interference. While intervention remained an exception rather than a rule, their survival demonstrated that carefully managed, ethically justified action could preserve life without undermining natural behaviors or ecological integrity. Policies were reviewed and protocols adjusted to account for extreme cases where human intervention could be warranted. The ripple effect of the river rescue extended far beyond the initial incident, influencing wildlife management practices across the continent. Observing the pair in the wild, it became clear that their influence was generational. Over the following months, Mara's strength and resilience became evident as she produced cubs, introducing a new generation into the conservancy. Simba's protective behaviors extended to the young, demonstrating that learned social bonds could influence not only immediate survival, but also long-term familial structures. The river pride, as researchers came to call them, began to thrive, their movements and behaviors meticulously documented through GPS tracking and camera surveillance. These data provided unprecedented insight into pride formation, territorial strategies, and social cohesion, offering a model that could inform broader lion conservation strategies. For me, the experience was transformative. My role as a wildlife photographer evolved into something more complex, more responsible. I became an active participant in conservation documentation, blending visual storytelling with ethical responsibility and scientific observation. Lectures at universities, presentations at conservation symposiums, and collaborations with research institutions allowed me to share both the dramatic narrative of the river rescue and the nuanced scientific implications that followed. The story of Mara and Simba became a case study in ethics, cognition, and interspecies understanding, a living testament to the profound effects of compassion, observation, and careful intervention. 3 years later, I returned to the original riverbend where everything had begun. The water had returned to its natural level, and the dangerous mud traps were gone, replaced by flowing currents that mirrored the normal rhythm of the Savannah. Time-lapse equipment was set up to document seasonal changes, but my attention was drawn instead to the ridge above the river. Two figures stood there perfectly still, silhouetted against the horizon. Simba and Mara. Despite the distance, they were instantly recognizable. Every line of their bodies, every flick of their ears, a living memory of that fateful river rescue. They observed me with the same intensity I had remembered from our initial encounter. It was a quiet acknowledgement, a recognition of shared history that transcended words. For several moments, we existed in that suspended space, a human and two wild predators, bound by circumstance, trust, and an unspoken understanding of the events that had unfolded years earlier. Slowly, with the same deliberate grace that defined their every movement, they turned and disappeared into the tall grass, leaving me with a profound sense of connection and reflection. Science urges caution against anthropomorphizing animal behavior, and yet in that fleeting moment, it was impossible to ignore the resonance of what we had witnessed. The river pride had become not only a subject of study, but a symbol of the intricate and often surprising depth of life in the wild. Their story challenged assumptions about intelligence, emotional capacity, and the nature of trust across species boundaries. The research inspired by Mara and Simba's journey has influenced conservation protocols, human-wildlife interaction policies, and ongoing studies in animal cognition. Across Africa, wildlife management programs now incorporate more nuanced approaches to predator intervention, balancing ethical restraint with opportunities for life-saving action. The lessons learned extend far beyond lions, offering insight into the broader interplay between humans and wildlife in complex ecosystems. For me personally, the river rescue remains an indelible memory, a moment when compassion, instinct, and risk converge to alter the course of lives, both human and animal. My camera continues to capture the wild, documenting struggle, beauty, and resilience. Yet, in every frame, there is also the quiet awareness of that extraordinary bond between Simba and Mara, a bond that defied danger, crossed species, and ultimately reshaped our understanding of what it means to coexist with the natural world. Sometimes, as Mutai had said years before, the right path truly does walk through the wrong gate. One split-second decision on a riverbank led not only to the survival of two magnificent lions, but also to insights that may help secure the future of their species. It is a story of trust, survival, and connection, a story that reminds us that even in the vast, untamed wild, profound relationships can form, defying expectation and transcending boundaries. The river pride thrives to this day, a living testament to resilience, intelligence, and the enduring power of bonds that can exist across species. And in the quiet moments, when the wind carries the scent of the savannah and the distant roar of lions echoes across the plains, I remember the river, the mud, and the moment when compassion intersected with instinct, forever altering the lives of Mara, Simba, and all of us who bore witness.